So that's it. Agriculture and food security, very related to energy. I know the latest one now is the petrol price hike in the country and how we're going to handle it. But let's first understand. We have seen a statement from Dangote refinery. We were told that the circulation of Dangote petrol will begin today, 48 hours after the production began. But they had hinged it on the activities or the lifting by NNPCL. So we're waiting for NNPCL now for the lifting of Dangote Petrol. Meanwhile, we have seen the adjustment on pump prices for petrol. And want to try to understand if this has anything, if there's a subsidy in there, or can we expect that subsidy will be introduced later and prices will taper? So since I'm not an expert in that area, I have someone who is an expert right here. Dr. Wisdom Ena is an oil and gas expert, joins us in the studio. Dr. Ena, good afternoon. So we're trying to understand, we know that the president had said subsidy is gone, but subsequently we had directly or indirectly that subsidy is back. Now, petrol prices have been, it's no longer a rumor, it's reality. We have it at petrol station, NNPC, and of course, once NNPC increases its price, others will certainly follow suit. I hear some people are paying as much as 1,200 now in places like Port Harcourt in Rivers State. So we're just curious, do we still have subsidy from your calculation?
Thank you very much, Ini. I think what we need to know and start from is what is the landing cost and what are the nuances that has fed into some of the pricing that we've seen in recent times. The landing cost, when we take into consideration the cost of the refined product itself, and we also take into consideration the shipping cost as well as the insurance cost, it's about 1,203 naira at the moment.
That would be for what? The landing cost?
Yeah, for the PMS.
Okay, it will be about 1,300?
1,203 naira.
Okay.
Yeah. And then when you look at that, this is at the moment in September. When you look at such a landing cost, we already know that one way or the other, subsidy was being applied at 617. We do know that, which is what was the guide price at the retail pumps. Now, the big question was, how were we absorbing this, right? So it now looking in retrospect, it almost seems like the federal government, by saying subsidy was out, meant they were not going to make subsidy payments to other entities that were involved in importation business, which was, of course, one of the biggest challenge because of the, fake subsidy claims that were coming in. However, it still means that we were actually paying the NNPC subsidy of some sort, money towards applying subsidy, right? And that's what we realized. At first, it was called a price cap, but now we're realizing that it was actually subsidy. But I think the biggest regret is that subsidy was out as a much better naira rate, and now it's in at a worse naira rate, so it's much bigger. Right?
I wonder if it was ever out, though.
No,
yeah, because let's look at those details that make up the price of petrol, a liter of petrol. So we have the landing cost, which you say is about 1,203.
Yeah.
Let's have a rough idea of, we have the Port Authority charges.
Correct.
I know it varies. Do you have an idea? Because I know it varies depending on contracts.
Correct.
Yeah. But do you have an idea, an average of the ports?
No, not the exact charges, but I do know that if we take all the charges into account, plus the cost of internal distribution, we should be selling at 1.3. That's what I know. But
okay, are you talking of when you add all of this landing costs, Nigerian
plus
ports,
some of the marginal
vessel
profits,
charges,
correct.
Nigerian Maritime Administration,
correct.
Insurance.
Correct.
So we should be looking at about 1,300.
As a guide price, yes. That's what we should be looking at.
All right.
Yeah. Well, for me, when I look at the pricing that has been reviewed upwards, I'm asking myself a number of questions. And the first question I'm asking myself is that going to be now the new price? And it's quite interesting that it's coming just before we begin to talk about the launch of the Dangote refinery.
I think we got the change the same day, of the production.
Yeah, but I got the message
because you're in the industry.
Yeah, before I even got the Dangote news that he has officially produced. So my question now is, right, is that hinged on the new price based on Dangote selling? Because again, it would make some sense. And I said that when you look at if we're internally buying crude in Naira, we're skipping all the logistics and insurance costs, we should technically, and we can have a large scale of scale of production, economic scale of production, because the Dangote is coming in at 25 million per day to start with, liters per day. We can technically expect ourselves to be below the price of importing, and that should be the gain. But with the current pricing, we're not sure if that is what has been applied. We're not even sure if we're still going to be paying subsidy at that particular point in time. We're not sure the agreement. I mean, it's very interesting to state that when you look at the agreement that says the NNPC will be the sole buyer at the moment, it's a very good, I like to say, a clever way of trading off between monopoly and a liberalized economy. Because the monopoly is basically one seller selling to the rest of the public. Liberalized is where we have demand and supply playing a role. But of course, in a liberalized system, if you do not have adequate supply to hedge the demand, you then will not have a good equilibrium price. And of course, you'll be having a seller's market. But then the government has come up with monopsony, which is typically one buyer rather, buying all of those products and then controlling the price. So it's interesting to say, are we controlling the price on the context that there's still subsidy? Are we controlling the price, with the monopsony situation? Is that a fair price to say, putting all these considerations, the Naira, the crude of sale in Naira, a large scale of production, and also factoring every other thing that they support, that the regulators will give out to the Dangote refinery, that we can now bring in products and sell it at about 855 guide price, and that would be below the importation cost. I think if that is true, then that would be great. But if we're still applying subsidy, then that would be sad, because we need to know the devil in the details. And that is, what is the actual price unsubsidized for our local production from the various production refineries, or for example, the Dangote refinery. Interestingly is, again, what happens if the Dangote refinery, for example, one particular month has to get a lot of feedstock from abroad, and then we cannot give him feedstock? What happens to the pricing? And then, of course, at the 855 guide price, what happens when other refineries come on stream, or the existing refineries? Can they still sell at that price and make profits? Because of course, you look at the economies of scale, you find out that the Dangote is quite big and can play around with economies of scale. So how will the other refineries cope with all of this?
Yeah, so many questions, and it boils down to what a lot of analysts have said, which is, can the government be open and transparent with the people? If NNPCL is going to be the sole buyer from Dangote, which is risky, as you have said, because, are we talking of a monopoly market, which we have been preaching against and all of that, then how much is it coming at? Because then we should have at least a reduction in the price of vessel charges, insurance, since it's within the country. And if the government is actually implementing the crude for Naira, then we should also see that reflect. And perhaps that could help the president's pronouncement implementing the issue of no more subsidy. But we need to know the numbers. And as you said, the devil is in the details. But it seems we don't have communication.
It's very difficult because, if I just line up the narrative from the NNPC side, I get very worried. Within the last 4 weeks, we've heard we're not able to discharge because of thunder. Because of the weather, of course, it's cited thunder as an example. We've also heard that it's not uncommon to owe in this business, but at the same time,
first there was a denial of the debts.
Yeah, but I'm coming to that. It's not uncommon to owe in the business, but we do owe, and that we're keeping up with our obligations. Now we've also heard that we are financially constrained. What is narrative? I think it is important for people to know exactly where we are tilting, and if we, this is really important, because the NNPC's activity affects the funds that we run in this, sovereignty called Nigeria. And if we don't have clarity, then we have decisions being made without us knowing what options were on the table for the choice to be selected, and then that affects our well-being as a country. So I think you're right. The need for the government to come up more clearly, more transparently, is very important. And it's also important for us to have a real clear sync between the government policies, the NMPC, who are also at the front end of these, the NMDPRA, and of course the refineries that are the local refineries. I think it is important for us to put all of this in context and put out the right narrative to the Nigerian people and the international investors who are also watching.
I would also like to bring in the perspective of the modular refineries, because Dangote is not the only domestic refiner in the country. We have the modular refiners who've been there, but I guess because of their size, their voices have not really been heard. I wonder where they come into all of this in this scenario.
I think, I keep saying the modular refineries are going to help us to sort of address some of those regional markets, right, where there are positions. Because I wouldn't say the numbers. If you think about what the NMDPR told us in October 2023, which was the last data I could find, that our daily consumption is about 44.3 million capacity, but that has probably come down. And of course, it's quite cyclic depending on the weather and other things. And if we have, for example, steady electricity or not. But the truth of the matter is Dangote is coming at 25. So who's going to fill the void that is going to ensue? Are we going to import, or are we going to get the modular refineries that are to optimize, the ones that are existing, to optimize their production for at least this regional market? What is the technique? And this is where it comes in. So we need to understand that, yeah, the Dangote refinery can play a central role, but we still need the people at the wings to be able to feed the people that are desiring fuel and energy across the various regions. And that's where they play the role. And so we must carry them along. And even when we're looking at pricing, I'm interested to know if the federal government had put into consideration the pricing that would help those guys to be able to grow, or are we still having subsidy? And if we're having subsidy, what's what's the kind of conversations that are going towards addressing that? Because look at it, a few days ago, we heard that one of the Nigerian planes were kind of seized because of a debt or an agreement, really, between one of the subnationals and an international. So we need to understand that whatever we do, whether we do it at the federal level or we do it within one of our entities in the country, it affects the entire picture. So I think that clarity needs to come out, and we need to start working out a path of recovery. How do we pay off this debt, and how do we get into a position where it is sustainable? Sustainable practice is really important. And then, of course, there's this other issue where we're talking about let's increase prices to a point where we don't have cross-border smuggling. How do we handle that? Because we cannot also be increasing prices arbitrarily and punishing people for not doing the right thing or protecting our borders.
I think this is for another day, because there's still the issue of the supply of crude. Whether it's for Dangote or for the modular refineries,
Correct.
They need crude.
Absolutely.
And that is being used to pay off debts. And that's it.
Absolutely.
But we'll leave that for another day. Thank you so much, Dr. Wisdom Enang, oil and gas expert, for your time.
Thank you. Deeply appreciate it.